Prime Minister, in the last week alone,
Cool.
you've been accused of grabbing a journalist's thigh, you've been accused of sleeping with a businesswoman you were dealing with as Mayor of London, you've been accused of shouting down female MPs. Should women trust you?
Absolutely. And look at what we're doing. Look at what I said on the steps of Downing Street. We had a very clear agenda, 20,000 more police officers. That's what we're delivering. Look at what we're doing on the NHS. I promised.
What does this have to do with women specifically, though, Prime Minister? Can women trust you?
Well,
Given your personal track record, can they trust you?
Sorry, you asked me about whether anybody can trust me, whether women can trust me. I'm talking about what I'm doing for the electorate as a whole. And I think what a lot of female voters care about is whether our streets are safe. That's why we're putting 20,000 more police officers out on the streets. I think people care deeply about our NHS.
But specifically on this,
but
Prime Minister, specifically on this issue of your track record with women, do you think you've set a good example to the country?
Look, I think if you look at my type of government, the administrations that I've run, look at what we had in City Hall. I had women at the very top of that administration. It was more or less a total feminocracy in City Hall. Look at what I did when I was Mayor of London. The number one policy that we had was to, as the solution for most of the problems of the world, was to promote 12 years of quality education for every girl.
Okay.
Yes, I'm not going to deny that lots of stuff is being thrown at me at the moment, Paul. But this is a very turbulent time in British politics, and people will want to try to knock the government off course, because at the moment we are tasked with a difficult mission, but a vital mission, which is to get Brexit done by October the 31st.
Are you saying then that these questions about your personal life are somehow politically motivated?
No, I mean there are lots of different points that you sort of kicked off with, and you know, some of them are completely untrue, and you know, actually they're all completely. I can't remember what you. I certainly didn't shout anybody down, and I think they're all completely untrue. I don't wish to impugn the motives and of people who make these comments, nor do I wish to minimise the importance of the issues that are raised, but they're not correct. And what I have to do is focus on the job in hand. We've got to get Brexit done by October the 31st, but we've also got to deliver a fantastic domestic agenda.
I promise you we will get onto your policies. Just lastly on this issue, you say that you didn't grab Charlotte Edwards' leg at that dinner 20 years ago. What do you remember about it?
All I know is that it's not true.
Do you remember having lunch sitting next to her?
To be honest, I can tell you that it is not true.
But do you remember having that lunch?
I don't, to be honest. I have no memory whatever.
So if you don't remember it, how are you so sure it's not true?
Well, I can tell you, it is absolutely not true.
But you don't remember it, Prime Minister, so why should we take your word over somebody who does remember that lunch?
It is not true, and for all sorts of reasons. And I don't wish to, as I say, minimise the importance of the subject. I don't wish to you know, cast aspersions on the motives of anybody who makes this type of allegation, but it is not true. And what I want to do is to focus on our domestic agenda. And actually, if I may say so, I think that what we're doing is, I think there are more announcements at this conference than I've seen at any Conservative
Let's talk
Party
about
conference.
politics then. Let's talk about politics. Prime Minister, can you tell me the price of a litre of petrol?
Look, I'm not here to answer general knowledge questions or answer pub quiz questions.
The reason I ask you, Prime
I'm
Minister,
here to talk about what we're going to do to take this country forward.
But the reason I ask you is,
and let me tell you one of the things
what kind of hike in the cost of petrol would be acceptable to you if prices rise in the event of a no-deal Brexit?
Well, we don't want a no-deal Brexit, and we're working very hard to prevent a no-deal Brexit. And what we will try to do is minimise any impact whatever from a no-deal Brexit. And that's why we're working so hard to get a deal. And it's not going to be easy, Paul. I think there will be some difficult conversations to be had in the course of the next few days, but I'm hopeful that we'll get there, and that's what we want.
The point I'm trying to draw out here is that you don't have to fill your car with petrol. You don't have to pay the price that might be put on petrol. You're insulated from many of the risks. What is the personal jeopardy to you here of a no-deal Brexit? There's a lot of jeopardy out there for normal voters, but what's the personal risk for you in any of this?
Well, we have to minimise the risks of a no-deal Brexit. A great deal of work has been done to mitigate those risks, but I think actually people really want to see the UK come out, and they want, whether they're leavers or remainers, they want to see us get a deal if we possibly can, but also come out on October the 31st, and that's what we're going to do. And we know when you talk about the impact on prices, yes, of course we want to avoid that, and of course we want to minimise dislocation of supply chains and all the rest of it. A huge amount of work has been done, but we have to get ready for that possibility in order to get a deal.
You say you want a deal. What exactly will you be offering EU leaders this week that you're so sure they'll accept?
Well, I'm not so sure that they'll accept it. I hope that they will. I think that they should. I think it's a very good offer. We'll have to work very hard, but if you don't mind, I won't won't negotiate with them through your good offices.
There have been leaks today in the newspapers, though, Prime Minister. I mean, talks of custom checkpoints, of check posts. Is any of that true?
Well, no, that's inaccurate. And insofar as the leaks refer to new infrastructure anywhere, that's not what is envisaged. So
there'll be no physical checks, to be clear. You're not suggesting any.
There's been a confusion.
You're not suggesting any physical checks as part of this new deal?
I think what you have to recognise is that if the UK is to come out of the customs union, as it must, and that's the right thing for us to do, because if we're actually to take advantage of Brexit, then the whole of the UK has got to come out. And in those circumstances, the EU itself insists on there being some checks. Now, what we're saying is that those checks don't need to take place at the border. They don't need to necessitate, they don't need to involve new infrastructure, but you must, I think where this is where the rubber hits the road, you must have checks and of some kind. Now, those can be checks between the importer and the exporter, the expediter and the recipient. There are ways of managing it that don't involve physical infrastructure and aren't laborious.
So no physical infrastructure. You are ruling that out, just to be clear. No physical infrastructure, because that's what the EU just won't stomach.
I know, quite all right. And the suggestion that we're going to, as it were, create new customs checks 5 miles in from the border, new border posts 5 miles. That's obviously not right. And I think, I've seen what Simon Coveney has had to say about that, and I would agree with him about that.
Do you think the chances of a deal are increasing or decreasing at this point?
Well, I think the chances of a deal are good, but it depends on common sense, and it depends on both sides really working together to get this thing done. And look, it is going to be a tough period now, but we've got to get through it, and we've got to come out of the EU on October the 31st, because when I look at the state of the debate in politics at the moment, it's been going on for too long, this discussion. And I think both in the UK and in the EU, people want done with it.
And will you, as reported, ask the EU as part of a deal to rule out any further extension to the Brexit deadline?
We haven't done any such thing so far, but what I can say is I don't think that our friends really want us to stay in beyond October the 31st. That's not where they are. It's not where we are. Let's get it done.
Would it be helpful to you if they ruled out any further extension?
I don't. It's not my impression.
Is it worth an ask?
It's not my impression. With great respect to you, Paul, I'm not going to negotiate through you, but I will. We are making progress.
Just want to talk about a bit of other policy too. County lines is an issue that ITV News has followed very closely. We've done a lot of investigations into it. What we found actually is that it's not about treating gangs, it's about austerity, it's about cuts in public financing of things like youth clubs. So all the announcements today are about treating the symptom, not the cause, aren't they?
No, we're also doing a huge amount to finance youth clubs, and we will be putting investment into training for young people, more into FE, further education, more into education as a whole, levelling up funding of education across the country, because I agree with you, Paul, that is the way that's the best antidote to any criminal instinct in the country. If people have the opportunity to get a good job, if they have diversions from crime, obviously that's vital. But at the same time, you do need to be very tough with the county lines gangs, and they are terrible guys. The people who are running these gangs, masterminding it, are basically using young kids as drugs mules who are throwing away their lives on the streets of our towns and cities to feed drugs habits, and this thing needs to be rolled up. So you're right. You need to look at both ends of it, but you also need a strong criminal justice, law and order response to county lines.
Just lastly, because we've got to wrap this up now, Prime Minister, I've seen you out and about. I've been with you when you've been out and about. You do draw a crowd. Many people come and say, let's get Brexit done, but many people come and they heckle you too. How do you cope with that confrontation?
Well, I obviously got to soak it up, and very proud to be Prime Minister at a very fascinating moment for our country. I love every day that I do the job.
Does it bother you being divisive like that, though?
Well, I think, if I may say so, to get back to my key point, the way to bring our country together, the way to heal the rifts in our country, is to deliver on the mandate of the people, which was the single biggest vote for any party or proposition in the history of this country. And I think one of the reasons perhaps that there's a bit of shot and shell at the moment is that there are quite a few people who don't necessarily want to get Brexit done, and rightly or wrongly they think that I am going to get it done, and I am going to get it done, and of course they want to do what they can to interrupt that, and I think that would be a real mistake. Democracy requires that we deliver on Brexit, and that's what we're going to do.
And very, very finally, because we always have to ask you a fun question at the end, Prime Minister, you've described yourself in the past as being like the Hulk. But even he turns back into a sensitive
Bruce
scientist,
Banner.
though.
Yes.
What sort of softer alter ego would you compare yourself to? You're not all.
No, well, I would be proud to be compared to Bruce Banner, the nuclear physicist. Wasn't he? Look, I think you're asking a very good question, Paul. I've been tasked with getting Brexit over the line at a time of national controversy. And there's no way of fudging it. You can't be half in and half out of the EU. You can't be 52% out and 48% in. It just doesn't work.
But do you still have that? Do you still have that softer side?
Well, yeah, of course. I don't know what you mean exactly by that. You're right, but yes. I mean, I suppose if that's yes.